The ocean was a black, endless void behind them, and a raging wall of white in front of them. The lifeboat pitched violently again, sending a spray of freezing salt water across Ella Parker's face. She gasped, gripping the edge until her knuckles turned white. The sky was a furious sheet of gray, and lightning slashed across it like someone tearing open the heavens. The wind howled so loudly she could barely hear her own breath. Somewhere behind the roar, she knew the cruise ship they had been thrown from was disappearing into the storm. Ella Parker, 28, just an ordinary communications assistant from Austin, was shaking uncontrollably. Her clothes were soaked through. Her teeth clattered so hard she worried they might crack. Every breath was a shiver. Her fingers were numb. Hypothermia was not a slow death. It was fast, faster than she had expected. She hugged her arms around herself, but it changed nothing. The cold was living inside her now. A meter away sat Liam Cross, 37, billionaire creator of green energy technology, a man whose face had appeared on magazine covers, investor panels, and viral think pieces. He was drenched, hair plastered to his forehead jaw, locked tight. Even in the chaos, he looked controlled, except his eyes. His eyes gave him away. They kept flicking to Ella, scanning her face, noticing every tremor in her hands, every twitch of her lips. He recognized the signs. He had seen them once before on a mountain in Colorado, and that memory made his heartbeat stutter. Hypothermia. He inhaled sharply and tightened his grip on the raft's side. Ella's breaths grew shorter, then her eyes unfocused. Her body jerked in a sudden spasm. Ella. His voice cracked through the storm as he leaned toward her. "Can you hear me?" She blinked slowly. Eyelids' heavy lips slightly parted. Nausea rolled through her, and she swallowed hard. "I'm so cold." Her voice was barely even a voice, more like a ghost of one. Her body shook again, and this time she could not stop it. Liam cursed under his breath. He had been trying to keep them both stable, to conserve heat, to keep distance, so they did not unbalance the raft. But distance was no longer an option. "Sit up, look at me." She tried. She could not. She was slipping. "Ella." He reached across the gap and pressed his hand to the side of her neck. Her skin was like ice. Real fear flashed across his face. Not corporate fear, not PR fear, human fear, the kind that ripped straight into the chest. Are we dying?" The question came out of her mouth in a broken whisper that shattered something in him. He leaned in until his forehead nearly touched hers. "Not if I can help it." His voice was low, rough, close enough that she felt his breath, despite the freezing wind. He pulled off his waterproof jacket with shaking hands. It was the last real barrier he had against the cold, but he shoved it around her shoulders anyway. She flinched not from him, but from how her nerves screamed at the temperature change. "Ella, I need you to listen. If we do nothing, your body temperature will drop too fast." He hesitated, saying the next part felt oddly intimate, even with death clawing around them. "I can warm you, if you let me." Her breath hitched. His voice dipped even lower. "Can I warm you up?" She stared at him. Confusion, fear, a flash of vulnerability so raw it pierced straight through the storm. She opened her mouth to answer, but the raft lurched violently, a monster wave slamming into them from the side. Ella's body slid. She screamed as her hand slipped off the rope. Liam lunged at her. Their bodies collided her weight, falling fully against his chest. His arm locked around her waist, instinctively holding her so tightly she could feel the tremor in his muscles. The raft spun water flooding over their legs, For a second, they were both airborne lifted just slightly off the bench, then dropped again with a brutal smack. Ella buried her face in Liam's chest without thinking. Her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. His other hand came up behind her head, cradling her in a firm, desperate grip. "Hold on to me." He breathed the words into her hair. She clung to him as the world tilted at impossible angles. The storm swallowed the ship behind them. The last trace of safety vanished into the darkness. The cold pressed in from every direction. Liam pressed his cheek against the top of her head, trying to shield her from the wind. Her breath hitched again, warm against his throat, for just a second before it faded into another shiver. The closeness was immediate and overwhelming. Her heartbeat pounded faint and rapid against his ribs. His breath hitched for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. For one suspended moment, they were not billionaire and employee, not two strangers who barely spoke on the cruise, not two people forced together by disaster. They were just human, terrified, fragile, alive only because they were holding on to each other. "I have you, Ella," his voice trembled. "I swear I have you." The raft dipped again, sending a spray of icy water over their faces. Ella's fingers tightened on his shirt, like she was afraid the ocean might tear him away. Liam lowered his mouth to her ear so his words would not be lost to the wind. "Stay with me. I need you to stay with me." She inhaled shakily. Her voice barely existed, but he caught it. "Please do not let go. I will not." His arm tightened. He felt her melt just slightly into him, her forehead pressing against his collarbone. The raft spun again, and their foreheads bumped. Their noses brushed, their breaths tangled in the cold air. He looked down at her hair-soaked lips, trembling eyes wide and terrified and trusting. Lightning flashed across the sky. For a heartbeat, the world froze in white light. Two silhouettes curled into each other in a tiny raft in a massive ocean. Then darkness returned, and Liam whispered against her temple, "I am here, and I am not letting you die." The storm raged, the sea roared, the night swallowed everything, except the warmth slowly growing between them, before the storm turned the world into a violent nightmare. Ella Parker's life had still been a storm in its own way, just quieter, more invisible, the kind you carried in your chest instead of in the sky. Weeks earlier, she had been sitting in her tiny Austin apartment, surrounded by medical bills she could not pay. Her mother's dialysis treatments had doubled in cost insurance, had denied an appeal, and Ella, 28, exhausted from juggling 2 part-time content jobs, was accepting the fact that she might have to sell her car. She had always been resilient, kind, soft in the ways that cost her the most. She had been raised to take care of people first and figure herself out later, but lately the math of her life had stopped adding up. She was running on fumes when her boss called her into the office and offered her a spot on a luxury corporate retreat, organized by Crosstech, a massive clean energy empire, known for its billionaire CEO Liam Cross. Ella did not understand why she was chosen. She was just a junior communications assistant, still fighting to prove she deserved her desk. But the retreat paid double her usual rate and covered all travel. She needed the money. So she said yes, pretending she was not terrified that something that looked like a blessing might turn into another stress she could not afford. Liam's world before the storm was the exact opposite. Sleek, perfectly scheduled, measured in profit margins and investors and innovations that changed entire industries. At 37, he was the poster child for American tech ambition, a man whose quiet determination had pushed green battery technology forward 10 years faster than predicted. He lived in a high-rise overlooking downtown Austin floor-to-ceiling windows, stone counters, the kind of apartment that felt like an art gallery more than a home. But beneath the polished exterior was a man held together by discipline rather than peace. Years ago, on a climbing trip in Colorado, he had lost someone he loved in a fall he could not prevent. Since then, his heart had gone quiet, his smile mechanical, his boundaries sharp. He spoke little. He distrusted people easily. He avoided personal questions the way others avoided danger. He hated how the media had spun the tragedy, how reporters had turned his grief into a headline that sold ads. He had never forgiven the world for watching him break. He had buried intimacy somewhere so deep he barely remembered what it looked like. When Crosstech planned its annual retreat aboard a large ocean liner, he had expected media staff, consultants, engineers. He had not expected Ella Parker. He noticed her the moment she walked onto the deck, though he would never admit it. She was not like the other PR staff. She looked nervous to be there, like she did not belong, like she was waiting for someone to tap her shoulder and say there had been a mistake. Her clothes were modest, her hair held back. No expensive sunglasses, no designer brand logos, just a backpack and a camera bag. Her kindness was obvious from the way she helped an elderly couple carry their tray at the dining hall and knelt to comfort a child vomiting from seasickness. Liam pretended not to watch, but his gaze kept drifting. Ella noticed him too, but only because his presence felt like walking past a powerful generator, a quiet humming pressure in the air. He was handsome annoyingly, so the kind of handsome that made people straighten their posture without realizing. But he looked untouchable, polished cold, like warmth had been carved out of him long ago. Their first interaction had been ungraceful. Ella had approached Liam with nervous politeness to ask if he could smile for a short engagement clip. She needed footage for Crosstech's livestream recap. He had stared at her for a long beat and responded with a flat, "Please do not use me for content." She had smiled awkwardly, even though her cheeks burned. Understood. Sorry. His eyes had flicked down to her shaking hands holding the camera. "You do not need to apologize for doing your job," he said stiffly, but his tone made it sound like he wished she had not asked at all. Ella walked away, vowing to never bother him again. But she noticed things. She noticed him quietly tipping a janitor who had spilled a tray of glasses. She noticed him handing a ginger tea to an engineer who looked pale. She noticed him staying behind after a presentation to help a staff member pick up fallen papers. Moments of softness he hid from the world, but did not hide well enough from her. Liam noticed things too. Like how Ella always stepped aside to let others go first. How she lent her portable charger to strangers. How she sat alone during breaks editing clips because she could not afford to get behind on work. How her eyes softened whenever she saw something beautiful like sunlight on the water. Then came the deck incident. A day before the storm, Ella had climbed to the front of the ship for a wide-angle shot but was too close to the rail. The wind gusted strong, and she slipped. For a split second, she saw the ocean tilt beneath her, and panic shot through her chest. Then a firm hand wrapped around her arm and steadied her, grounding her instantly. Liam. His jaw was tense, brows furrowed. "Be careful." His voice was low, but sharper than the wind. She swallowed, embarrassed. "I am sorry." I was just trying to get a good shot." He exhaled, not angry, more shaken than anything. The ocean does not care about good shots. It gave her chills, not because of the danger, but because for the first time, his voice held something real, something human. After that, she kept her distance, not out of fear, but out of a strange awareness she did not know how to name. He stayed distant too, but also oddly watchful, as if his eyes searched for her without thinking. On the evening before the storm, she sat alone editing footage near the railing. Liam stood several feet away, taking a call that sounded tense enough to tighten every muscle in his shoulders. When he hung up, he looked exhausted, rubbed the back of his neck, then said unexpectedly, "You are very good at what you do." She blinked. "I am sorry. The video work." He gestured to her laptop. "Most people on my staff try to impress me with polish, but you care about people more than optics. Your footage shows that." Ella felt warmth bloom in her cheeks. "Thank you. I try to capture real moments, not curated ones." He nodded again, and for a strange, suspended second, it seemed like he wanted to say more. But a crack of thunder rolled across the horizon, cutting the moment short. "Weather changes fast out here," he murmured almost to himself. She followed his gaze and saw distant clouds forming. Somewhere in that quiet tension between their two worlds, something invisible shifted. Two lives that had been running on separate tracks were now slowly angling toward collision. Ella went to bed that night with an uneasy feeling she could not shake. Liam returned to his suite with a heaviness he could not name. Neither of them knew that within hours everything they knew would be ripped away, but both of them felt it. A strange pull, a weight in the air, a foreshadowing neither could translate. On the morning of the storm, Ella woke early and found Liam already on deck, staring at the horizon. He did not acknowledge her, but he also did not walk away. That was the last calm moment before the ocean took over and forced their worlds to collide in the harshest way possible. And the last moment before they learned that when everything else was stripped away, the only thing left between them would be truth. The first sign that something was wrong was not the wind or the clouds. It was the silence, a strange, unnatural stillness that swept across the deck, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. Ella Parker stepped outside, with her camera bag still slung across her shoulder, expecting the usual chatter of staff, preparing for morning seminars. Instead, she found a deck nearly empty, and the sky an ominous gray sheet, thick and unmoving. Liam Cross stood near the railing phone, pressed to his ear, listening intently to someone on the other end. His jaw tightened. When he finally spoke, his voice was sharp. "That cannot be right. The weather report said clear skies for 48 hours. The reply must have been grim, because Liam's eyes lifted slowly to the horizon where a dark line of clouds was forming much too fast. "Understood? Do what you can." He ended the call and for a moment simply stood there motionless. Ella approached cautiously. "Is everything okay?" Liam did not answer immediately. Instead, he took a breath that seemed to steady him from the inside. "Storm systems shifted overnight," he finally said. "It was not supposed to hit anywhere near us, but it changed direction faster than predicted." Ella felt a small cold spike of fear between her ribs. How bad. He looked at her then, and the honesty in his eyes told her more than the words that followed. Bad enough. A loud crack of thunder ripped across the sky, startling them both. The wind picked up rapidly, whipping Ella's hair across her face. Crew members began shouting instructions, hurrying passengers toward interior corridors. Liam stepped closer without thinking. "Stay indoors and stay low. I am going to find out where the muster point is." But before he could move, the ship lurched violently to one side. Ella stumbled backward. Liam grabbed her arm, instinctively steadying her before she could hit the deck. A second later, another wave crashed into the hull, and the ship groaned deep within its steel frame. Crew voices shouted over radios, all urgency and panic. "This is wrong," Liam muttered under his breath. "This is too fast." Ella clutched the rail as the wind blasted across them, carrying salt and stinging droplets. Her heart pounded as fear rose hot in her throat. People were running now, grabbing life vests from emergency lockers, shouting names, calling for family members. An officer ran toward them. "Sir, you need to get below deck. The storm is intensifying too fast. We are initiating evacuation protocols." Evacuation. Ella's stomach twisted. "But the ship is huge." "Storms do not sink ships like this." The officer's expression said otherwise. "The system hit us on the beam side. If it tilts more than 20 degrees, we risk water intake. Move." Liam placed a firm hand on Ella's back, guiding her quickly toward the stairwell. People crowded past them, crying, pushing, desperate to follow, emergency lighting toward the lower deck. Ella's breaths came in fast, shallow bursts. Liam kept glancing back, checking for falling objects or shifting debris. As they reached the stairs, the ship tilted again, so hard that Ella's feet slipped on the wet steel. She cried out, and Liam caught her around the waist, pulling her tight to his chest until she regained balance. "Stay with me," he said over the wind. "Do not let go." They descended quickly through the narrow stairwell, lit by flickering red emergency lights. Ella clutched the railings so hard her fingers ached. Somewhere below them, alarms began blaring. Liam pushed forward until they reached the lower deck, where crowds were being ushered toward the lifeboats. But the scene was chaos. A wave slammed against the side of the ship with such force that a section of the railing tore loose, and swinging violently before crashing onto the deck. People screamed and scattered. Crew members fought to keep order, but panic surged like electricity through the crowd. Liam tightened his hold on Ella and forced a path through the bodies. There, he pointed toward a lifeboat suspended by thick metal cables. Ella's pulse skyrocketed. "I do not want to get in one of those." Liam leaned down so his voice reached only her. "It is safer than staying here. Trust me." The ship jolted again, throwing several passengers to the floor. One woman slid dangerously close to the open edge. Without thinking, Ella lunged, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. The woman sobbed in gratitude, but Ella barely heard her own breath over the thundering of her heartbeat. A crew member shouted from the loading platform, "This boat is at capacity, no more." Liam's jaw set in a hard line. Then where? Another wave hit, slamming the hull with a thunderous crack that vibrated through their bones. A different crew member pointed frantically to the opposite side of the deck. "Lifeboat 7, go now, hurry." Liam grabbed Ella's wrist and ran. Every step felt unstable, as if the ship was slipping beneath them. They reached the loading platform just as several people climbed into the small orange vessel. A crew member with rain running down his face held his arm out. "Move, move, you two, now." Ella hesitated at the edge, staring into the small, cramped lifeboat, swaying violently on its cables. Her legs trembled. Liam saw it instantly. He cupped the back of her arm with surprising gentleness, despite the chaos around them. "Ella, look at me." Her eyes snapped to his. His expression was fierce but steady. "We have to go right now." She swallowed hard, then nodded. The crew member reached to help her in when another monstrous wave hit the ship. The deck tilted more than 30 degrees. People screamed as bodies slid. Ella lost her footing and stumbled toward the edge. Liam lunged, catching her again, pulling her fully against him. The crew member grabbed both of them and shoved them into the lifeboat. Ella fell against the bench. Liam landed beside her, gripping the rail as the boat swung wildly. The officer outside shouted something, but his words were lost in the storm. The cables strained. Metal screamed. Then with one violent jolt, the mechanism snapped. The lifeboat dropped. Ella's scream tore from her throat as they plummeted several feet before slamming into the water with bone-jolting force. Water splashed over them, soaking them instantly. The boat spun violently, tossed like a leaf in a hurricane. Ella clung to the bench, her heart in her throat. Liam reached out, gripping the railing above her head, caging her in to stop her from being thrown across the boat. The cruise ship loomed above them, lights flickering like dying stars. Ella's eyes widened with terror as the ship drifted farther away. Liam followed her gaze. His voice cracked through the chaos. "Stay down, do not stand." The next wave lifted their lifeboat high, then dropped it again. Each slam rattled their bones. Ella felt her stomach flip as water splashed over her legs, filling the bottom of the boat. She shouted over the wind, "Are we too far?" Liam shook his head, determined, even though fear flickered in his eyes. "We are alive. That is what matters." The ship's lights grew smaller, swallowed by rain and distance, until they blurred into nothing. Ella's breath caught painfully in her chest. Liam's hand closed around hers, a grounding touch, a promise despite the chaos. "You are not alone. Not out here. Not with me." The storm raged on. The ocean roared like a living beast. And in a single violent, impossible moment, two people who never should have collided were thrown into a fight for survival that neither had been prepared for. Their lives, their worlds, their entire histories were now tied to the same fragile piece of orange plastic drifting in a furious sea with no guarantee of rescue. The storm did not stop when the cruise ship vanished. It only changed shape. The first hour inside, the lifeboat was nothing but violent waves and the constant threat of capsizing. By the time the worst of the wind finally eased, the night had turned silent in a way that made the ocean feel even more dangerous. The boat drifted aimlessly, rising and falling with each swell, like a heartbeat too slow to save a life. Ella Parker sat curled against the side of the raft, her hair dripping, her breaths short and uneven. She hugged her knees as if her arms were the only thing keeping her body together. Her skin had turned pale, almost gray, beneath the dim emergency light, and her lips trembled uncontrollably. Liam Cross watched her from the opposite side. At first he tried to stay composed, to keep his breaths measured, to think through the problem the way he always did. Calculate, assess, delegate. But none of that worked here. Not when the cold had started to sink into his bones. Not when he could hear Ella's teeth chatter despite the thunder that still rolled far in the distance. She was going into shock. He knew the signs too well. Ella's eyes flickered open for a moment, and she looked around, disoriented. "Where is the ship?" Her voice cracked in the middle of the sentence. "Gone." His response was quiet, matter of fact, but the truth of it sliced through the air like ice. Her chest tightened as fear took over. "My mom," she whispered breathlessly. "She is sick. I need to call her." Liam swallowed hard. "Ella, no one has signal now." She let out a small broken sound and pressed her forehead to her knees. Her shoulders shook once, twice, and Liam's stomach clenched. He hated that sound, the quiet kind of crying that came from a place deeper than fear, the kind that came from carrying too much for too long. Lightning flickered far away, casting a quick, sharp glow across her face. In that flash, Liam saw more than fear. He saw exhaustion, the kind people wore after years of surviving things no one saw. Ella Parker was not just cold. She was unraveling. Liam forced himself to move. He shifted closer across the slippery floor of the raft and crouched beside her. Ella. She did not lift her head. Her body just trembled harder. He lowered his voice, the way he would speak to a frightened animal, gentle but steady. You have to breathe slower. You are not getting enough air. She inhaled sharply, but it hitched halfway through like her lungs were refusing to work. Liam gently pressed one hand against her back. Feel this. Match my pace. He breathed in slowly, letting his own breath steady before exhaling just as slowly. She tried to follow, but another shiver cut through her. Liam moved closer, instinct taking over. Ella, look at me. It took a moment, but she finally raised her head. Her eyes looked glassy, unfocused, half here, half somewhere else. Liam cupped her face with both hands, steady, gentle, anchoring her through the shaking. We are alive. He said each word with intention. Emphasis, certainty he did not feel but knew she needed. You and me, we made it into the boat. That means something. Her breathing stuttered but did not completely fall apart this time. Liam kept his hands on her cheeks, feeling the cold radiating from her skin. It terrified him more than he expected. He swallowed slowly. Ella, I have been in a situation like this before. Her eyes widened faintly. You what? Years ago, he whispered. On a mountain. I know what severe cold does to the body. You cannot let yourself drift. Not now. Her lower lip quivered. What happened? His jaw tightened. Someone with me did not make it. Ella's breath caught. I am sorry. Liam dropped his forehead gently against hers, just for a second, grounding himself, grounding her. Do not be. But I am not losing you. Some part of her finally reacted to his voice, to the conviction in it. She took a slightly steadier breath. Liam exhaled in relief. Good, just like that. Stay with me. They stayed like that until her breathing evened out a little. When he finally pulled his hands away from her face, she shivered again and curled in on herself. The cold was not slowing, it was winning. Liam glanced at the small emergency kit. No blankets, no thermal wraps, nothing helpful. He cursed beneath his breath, and without thought he shrugged off his soaked jacket. The rain slap cold against his spine made him flinch, but he pushed through it and draped the jacket around Ella's shoulders again, tucking it close to her body. She stared at him, eyes wide. You will freeze too. I can handle it, he said quietly, even though a violent shiver ran through him the moment he said it. She reached weakly for the fabric. Liam, you need this. He shook his head. You need it more. He sat beside her close, but not touching, though every part of him wanted to reach out. They sat like that for several minutes. The ocean sloshed gently against the sides. The air was damp and cold and smelled like metal and fear. Ella's shivering only worsened. Liam felt the panic in his chest rise again. Then, without giving himself time to hesitate, he moved next to her, closing the last inches between them. Ella leaned away, slightly startled. Liam moved slow, careful not to startle her further. Basic survival, he murmured. Body heat. She stared at him, her expression vulnerable and frightened and hesitant. Liam softened his voice. "I will not do anything you do not want. I am just trying to keep you warm." She held his gaze for a long, shaking breath. Then she whispered, "I do not want to die out here." "You will not," he said firmly. She nodded faintly. A silent yes. He reached for her waist, hesitating to give her time to stop him. When she did not, he gently pulled her toward him. She collapsed against his chest, as if her body had been waiting for someone to hold it together. His arms wrapped around her instinctively, one around her back, the other around her shoulders, bringing her fully against him. Her breath hitched when her cheek pressed to his collarbone. He felt every tremor of her body against him. He pressed his chin lightly to the top of her head. "You are all right. Stay close." She gripped his shirt weakly, curling into him in a way that made something deep in his chest tighten. The storm had quieted to a distant rumble, but the cold was still merciless. Liam pulled her closer, letting her entire weight rest against him. Her breathing slowly steadied against his chest. He exhaled a long, trembling breath he had not realized he was holding. Minutes passed, maybe more. Ella's head rested against his shoulder. Her eyelids drooped heavy with exhaustion. Liam felt her breaths warm against his neck. It startled him how natural it felt, not forced or uncomfortable, not inappropriate, just human and raw and necessary. After a long silence, Ella whispered into his shirt, "Thank you." He felt her words like a small warm pulse through the cold. He lowered his voice to a near whisper, "I told you, you are not alone." Her fingers curled slightly in his shirt, holding on. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting his forehead rest lightly on her hair. The ocean drifted beneath them. The night softened around them. And somewhere between fear and cold, something inside both of them shifted. Not romantic, not yet, but something softer than survival. Something that rooted them together in a way the world had never once done for either of them. The second day began, not with panic, but with a strange stillness, the kind that follows devastation and leaves behind only the subtle hum of survival. Ella Parker woke slowly. Her body curled against something warm and solid, her cheek pressed to fabric that smelled faintly like salt and cedar. Her mind was foggy at first, drifting somewhere between sleep and shock, until her senses sharpened one by one. The gentle rise and fall beneath her ear, the steady warmth radiating around her, the faint brush of breath near her forehead. Liam. Realization hit her all at once. She jerked slightly upright, her face flushing, despite the cold, realizing she had been sleeping on his shoulder all night. His arm had been wrapped around her like a shield. She blinked hard at the morning light, embarrassed and disoriented. "Oh my God, I am sorry. I did not mean to fall asleep on you." Liam opened his eyes slowly, as if waking from a shallow, restless half-sleep. His voice was low and rough from the cold and exhaustion. "Do not apologize. You were freezing." He shifted slightly, wincing from stiffness in his back, but his expression stayed steady. The ocean around them had calmed into long rolling swells, still threatening but no longer violent. The sky had lightened into a pale, washed-out blue, weakened by scattered gray clouds. The silence felt too big, too empty, and Ella folded her arms tightly as another shiver ran through her. Liam noticed instantly. "Here." He reached behind him and adjusted the flimsy plastic tarp he had tried to anchor earlier in the night. It had partially collapsed, but enough remained to create a small shade that shielded them from the raw bite of the wind. Ella hugged her legs closer. The cold was different now. Less of a shock, more of a deep ache that settled inside her joints. Her fingers felt swollen, numb at the tips. She tried to wiggle them, but the stiffness did not go away. Liam watched her for another long second before pushing himself to his feet, gripping the edge of the raft for balance. "Stay seated. I am going to see what we have in the emergency kit." She nodded, pulling the jacket he had wrapped around her even tighter. She felt strangely exposed without the storm roaring around them. The stillness made her thoughts louder, the fear more present. She heard him rummaging through the small orange case, heard the clatter of plastic and the rustle of water packets. After a moment, he returned with a thin silver emergency blanket. It was flimsy, nearly useless against the cold, but it was something. He unfolded it and draped it around her, smoothing it over her shoulders with a tenderness he did not try to hide. She looked up at him. "Aren't you cold?" "Freezing," he admitted softly. "But you need this more than I do." She opened her mouth to protest, but he shook his head with a small, quiet certainty that silenced her argument before she could speak. He sat beside her again, but this time he did not immediately pull her against him. He waited, giving her space, giving her choice. But Ella felt the cold too deeply, too fiercely, and she felt the echo of last night's terror rise in her chest. She swallowed once and whispered barely audible, "Can you stay close?" The question was fragile. His reaction was not. He moved to her without hesitation, wrapping his arm firmly around her back, pulling her gently into him. She leaned into his chest, feeling his warmth seep into her through layers of wet fabric and thin foil. For a moment, neither spoke. They listened to the steady splash of waves against the raft, the soft creak of plastic shifting beneath them, and the distant cry of seabirds they could not see. Slowly, Ella's breathing steadied. She felt her heartbeat calm as her cheek rested over the steady thrum of his. Hours passed before either of them spoke again. When the sun reached its highest point, the heat began pressing down on them more heavily. Not enough to warm the ocean-soaked fabric, but enough to make their faces feel flushed. Liam shifted to pull the tarp back into a better angle. The makeshift cover gave minimal shade, but protected them from direct sunlight. Ella watched him quietly. The determined set of his jaw, the careful movements even while exhausted, the way his breath shook only when he thought she was not looking. He was as scared as she was, but he hid it, not behind ego, but behind responsibility. When he settled back, she cleared her throat. "Liam," he turned. "Thank you for last night, for everything." His gaze softened in a way she had never seen before. "You do not need to thank me." She shook her head. "I do. I do not know what would have happened if you had not been there." Something tightened in his expression, something old and painful. "You would still be here," he said quietly, "because I would not have let you fall. Not again." Ella frowned slightly. "Again." He looked away, the muscles in his jaw flexing. "I told you last night," he said slowly. "I have been in a situation like this before." She waited. He looked like he wanted to swallow the words before they escaped, but he did not. "I was with someone, years ago, on a mountain. A storm hit. We were trapped. I tried to keep her warm, but she slipped into hypothermia too fast. She did not make it." Ella's breath caught. "Liam, I am so sorry." He shook his head sharply. "It does not matter anymore." But the way he said it told her it mattered still. The loss lived in him like a shadow. Ella reached out carefully, placing her hand over his. His fingers twitched under hers before he finally turned his palm upward, letting their hands fit together. The contact was soft, gentle, but it felt like a line of electricity moving between them. Liam's voice dropped to a whisper. I could not save her. I was not strong enough, but with you. His gaze lifted to her face. His eyes were raw and honest and painfully open. I cannot lose you. Ella felt her breath stutter. He was not saying it romantically, not yet, but the intimacy was deeper than romance. It was survival, humanity, truth. She squeezed his hand. You are not going to lose me. A wave rolled beneath them, rocking the raft. Ella clutched his hand tighter, and for a moment it felt like the world consisted only of 4 things: the ocean, the sky, Liam, and her own heartbeat, pounding like a drum inside her chest. Hours later, they were hungry. The emergency rations had been soaked during the storm, half unusable. Liam managed to salvage a few energy bars and the smallest amount of fresh water. He slid one packet toward her. Eat. She pushed it back. You need strength, too. His expression was firm. Ella, you have to stay strong. She hesitated only a moment before opening the packet. They ate in silence. Chewing felt strange in the tense quiet. Afterward, Liam leaned back against the raft wall, stretching his aching legs. Ella mirrored his posture, her shoulder brushing his lightly. The sky above them had shifted to orange and gold, giving the ocean a warm glow that did not reach their frozen bodies. It is beautiful, she whispered. Even now. Liam followed her gaze. Even now, he echoed softly. She turned her head toward him. His hair was still damp and pushed back from his forehead in wavy disarray. His jawline was covered in faint stubble. He looked different from the man on magazine covers, softer, more human somehow. Ella traced his profile before catching herself and looking away quickly. Liam noticed, his voice lowered slightly. What is it? She hesitated, then spoke gently. You are not like I expected. He exhaled a humorless breath. What did you expect? Cold, unreachable. She swallowed. Untouchable. His eyes flickered with something bittersweet. And now she whispered, you look real. Liam held her gaze for a long moment, and something subtle shifted between them again. Not dramatic, not bold, just a quiet opening like a door neither had realized was locked. The sun lowered further, dipping into the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the water. The temperature dropped again, and as the cold crept back in, Ella pressed closer to him, her cheek brushing his shoulder. Liam's arm slid around her naturally, as though his body had already memorized the shape of holding her. The light faded, the sky darkened, and in the dim blue hush right before night fully took over, Liam leaned his head slightly toward hers. Just tell me if you want me close. His voice, barely audible, drowned almost entirely by the hush of the ocean. She turned her face up to him, eyes shining in the fading light. I want you close. The words left her like a confession. His breath caught. He shifted, wrapping both arms around her and pulling her fully against his chest. She melted into him without hesitation, her body fitting into the warmth he offered. They stayed like that. As night descended, 2 bodies pressed together for survival, but held together by something deeper. Something that felt like the beginning of trust, the beginning of a story neither of them had expected. The 3rd morning rose colder than either of them expected, the kind of cold that felt like it had crept into their bones during the night and refused to leave. Ella woke first, her eyes heavy, her body stiff from sleeping. Half curled in Liam's arms, Their warmth had kept each other alive through the night, but it had also left them exhausted, drained from fighting both the ocean and their own fear. She pulled back slightly, trying not to wake him, but his arm instinctively tightened around her waist, as if his body reacted before his mind. When he finally stirred awake, his jaw tense from sleeping upright, he looked as though he had not rested at all. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough. "Morning," she whispered. The sky was dim even though the sun had risen. A haze of gray clouds stretched from horizon to horizon, making the world look washed out. The ocean rolled beneath them in slow, heavy motions. Ella exhaled shakily and rubbed her arms. Liam watched her with a tightening expression. "The weather is shifting," he said quietly. "Storm season. We might get hit again." Ella swallowed hard. "How much food do we have left?" "One small bar each. Maybe enough water for a day or two." She nodded, but her face paled. She tried to hide how frightened she was, but Liam saw it all. He reached for the emergency mirror they had found lodged under the tarp and examined its cracked reflective surface. "If the clouds break," he said, "we use the sun to signal. If not, we hold out one more day." Ella's brows pulled together. "What if no one finds us?" "They will," he said firmly. Even though something in his eyes flickered with doubt, they fell into silence, and the silence settled thickly, like the air before a fight. Hunger sharpened their irritability. Exhaustion magnified every small misunderstanding. Ella tried to shift her position, and the raft rocked. "Watch it," Liam snapped before he could stop himself. She stiffened. "I am just moving a little. We do not have space to move a little." His tone came out harder than intended, but his nerves were frayed. So were hers. She snapped back without thinking. "I am aware we are stuck on a raft, Liam. I am the one who almost died of hypothermia, remember?" His jaw clenched. "I pulled you out of the water. I kept you from falling twice. Because you think you know everything she fired. Because you think your decisions are always right." His breath flared. "This is survival. I make the choices that keep us alive. And you do not even consider mine," she yelled. Not because she wanted to fight, but because the tension, the terror, the endless ocean were squeezing everything out of her at once. His expression hardened. "You really think I am doing this for control?" Ella stared at him, chest rising and falling. "I think you are scared, and you will not admit it." The words hit him like a slap. Something raw flashed across his face. Then he turned away, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. Ella instantly regretted it, but pride and fear kept her from apologizing. For a long stretch they sat in silence, staring at opposite sides of the raft. The ocean swayed them like a cradle with a cruel rhythm. Finally, Ella stood to check the tarp out of instinct, a small rational thought cutting through her frustration. The moment she shifted her weight, the raft tilted slightly. Liam opened his mouth to warn her, but he was too late. Her foot slipped on a slick patch of plastic. Her body jolted sideways. She gasped, grabbing for the edge, but her fingers slid. "Ella." Liam lunged just as she fell. Her shin slammed into the metal rod of the tarp frame, and she cried out in sharp pain. Liam caught her a second later, his hand gripping her shoulder tightly as he pulled her back upright. Ella hissed through clenched teeth, eyes squeezing shut. The pain radiated up her leg in hot waves. "Sit down," he ordered, voice trembling. She obeyed, this time breath shaking. Liam crouched beside her. "Show me." She hesitated. "Ella, let me see." She slowly lifted the soaked fabric of her pants. A gash ran along her shin, deep enough to bleed through the cold. Liam's stomach dropped. He reached for the medkit with frantic movements. Hold still. His hands were shaking, really shaking this time. She frowned. Liam. He did not answer. He tore open an antiseptic wipe, his breathing uneven. He pressed it gently to her wound. Ella inhaled sharply, but he persisted, working quickly and carefully. When she dared to look at him, she froze. His eyes were wide, not with annoyance, not with anger, but something close to fear. "Liam," she whispered, "why do you look scared?" His hands stilled. He kept his gaze on the wound, as though looking at her would make him crack. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost too low to hear. "Because losing you is the only thing I cannot handle right now." The world stilled. The ocean, the sky, the wind all felt muted. Ella's lips parted, but no words came. Liam swallowed, hard eyes flicking up to meet hers. Something like truth, something soft and vulnerable, flickered in his expression. He looked human, exposed, open in a way she had never seen. She reached out gently, placing her hand over his. He froze at the touch. "I am not going anywhere." She whispered. His breath caught. He closed his eyes for half a second, as if grounding himself. When he reopened them, there was something steadier in their depths, something that looked almost like resolve. After cleaning the wound, he wrapped her leg in the last sterile bandage. "We need to keep it dry," he murmured. "I will make sure of that." She nodded, watching him with new eyes. The argument from earlier felt small, suddenly irrelevant in the quiet aftershock of fear. When he finished, he sat beside her chest, rising and falling with heavy breaths. Ella leaned slightly against his shoulder, her voice soft. "I am sorry for what I said earlier." His shoulder tensed, then relaxed. "I am sorry too." The admission surprised her. He rubbed a tired hand over his forehead. "You were right," he added quietly. "I am scared." She looked up at him, stunned by the confession. He continued, voice rough. "I thought I could control this. I cannot. And the idea of something happening to you." He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Something shifted entirely between them. Their fight had cracked open everything neither of them had dared to say. Vulnerability pooled in the space between their bodies, warmer than the sun, weaker than the waves, stronger than their fear. Hours passed. The sky darkened again. They drifted in silence, but not the painful silence from earlier. This one felt closer, fuller, like their breaths were sinking without effort. Then as evening arrived, Liam spotted a faint, dark line along the horizon. "Land," he said sharply. Ella's heart leapt. "Are you sure?" "Yes, we need to paddle." He handed her one of the makeshift oars fashioned from broken raft pieces. She hesitated, eyeing her injured leg. He shook his head gently. "I will do the heavy work. Just keep us angled." They worked together, moving slowly but steadily toward the distant shape. The sky turned gold, then orange, then finally deep purple. And as night settled, the outline of a small island sharpened. When the raft finally scraped against the sand, Ella exhaled a sob of relief. Liam stepped into the knee-deep water, lifting her easily into his arms. Before she could protest, she clutched his shoulders, startled breath, brushing his neck. "I can walk," she whispered. "Not tonight," he replied, voice low and firm. "Not with that leg." He carried her through the shallow water toward the beach, the dark island rising behind them, like a promise, like the next chapter of their fight to survive. A shift had happened. Not just survival, not just necessity, something deeper, something fragile, something real. And neither of them could deny it any more. The island was nothing more than a crescent of sand, wrapped around a cluster of low palms and dense undergrowth. But to Ella and Liam, it felt like the first miracle since the storm. Liam set her down gently onto the sand, his hands lingering at her waist for half a second longer than necessary, as if confirming she was really there, really safe, really out of the water. Ella steadied herself, leaning lightly on her uninjured leg as she looked around. The air was warmer on the island. The wind felt softer. The scent of wet leaves and salt wrapped around them like a balm. For the first time in days, she could breathe without feeling like each inhale might be her last. Liam scanned the shoreline with a calculating expression. We need shelter before nightfall, food, fresh water if we are lucky. Ella nodded, though her leg throbbed sharply. She tried to step forward and stumbled. Liam reacted instantly, gripping her elbow with firm, steady fingers. Easy. You tore that leg open badly. She forced a small smile. It is fine. I can help build shelter. Liam's brows lowered. You can help by sitting. Ella huffed softly. I am not helpless. He looked at her then with a mixture of frustration and admiration. I know you are not. That is the problem. You will push yourself until you collapse. Let me handle this part. She hesitated, pride flickering, but the pain in her leg pulsed like a warning. After a moment, she nodded. She sank onto a patch of dry sand, watching him move with sharp, efficient purpose toward the washed-up pieces of the raft. He pulled the broken frame apart, tested each piece of wood, then dragged usable parts toward the tree line. Ella watched his muscles flex beneath the damp fabric of his shirt, watched the intensity in his posture, watched the way exhaustion never seemed to dim the determination burning behind his eyes. He was a man built from willpower and secrets, and here, stripped of his boardrooms and billionaire armor, she could finally see the man beneath. While he worked, Ella scanned the beach for anything useful. A cracked bucket, a floating storage bin wedged between rocks, several coconuts washed up in a cluster. She gathered what she could reach without straining her leg too much. Liam returned and frowned when he saw her dragging the bucket. Ella, she held up a hand. Do not say it. He exhaled, frustrated but undeniably impressed. You are impossible. I have been told that before. He shook his head, but she saw the ghost of a smile tug at the edge of his mouth. It softened him in a way she rarely saw. By late afternoon, Liam had turned the raft debris into a makeshift shelter, angling a curved frame of wood and thick leaves to block the wind. It was small, barely enough for two, but it felt like safety. Shelter, he said simply as he stepped back. Ella stared at the structure with genuine awe. Liam, this is incredible. He shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck. I built something similar once during a mountaineering trip. Survival instincts came back fast. Survival, and you have a long history, she murmured. His jaw tightened at that, but he did not pull away from the comment. Instead, he knelt beside her injured leg, checking the bandage. The dry sand stuck to his fingers. Does it hurt? He asked quietly. Only when I breathe, she teased. Liam shot her a look. I am serious, she softened. It hurts a little, but I am okay. He nodded relief, flickering through his expression. Good. Suddenly, Ella's stomach growled loud enough to make her flush. Liam looked up, eyebrows lifting. There it is, proof you are still human. Ella laughed under her breath. She had not realized how much she needed that small moment of levity. They searched the edges of the trees, staying close to the shoreline to avoid anything dangerous deeper inside. The coconut trees became their saving grace. Liam knocked several down, using a long branch, and Ella cracked them open with a rock, catching the juice in the bucket she had found. When Liam took the first sip, he closed his eyes briefly. God, that tastes like heaven. Ella watched the tension ease from his shoulders and felt warmth spread through her chest. When they ate the soft white flesh, it felt like a feast. They sat side by side on the sand, their bare feet half buried the sky above them, shifting toward sunset. Ella picked at a piece of coconut as she watched Liam quietly. She could feel something changing in the air between them. Liam, she began. He turned his head slightly. Thank you for building shelter, for the food, for everything you have done. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. You have done plenty too. You kept us moving toward land. You kept me talking when everything felt hopeless. And you are the reason we are still thinking clearly. Ella blinked at the unexpected tenderness in his voice. She looked away quickly, heat rising under her skin. Suddenly, a splash sounded behind her. She spun in alarm, but it was just a small reef shark gliding close to shore. Liam stepped automatically between her and the water, even though the shark was tiny. Ella reached for him. It is fine. Shore sharks do not bite unless provoked. He kept his arm loosely in front of her anyway. I am not taking chances. When the shark swam away, Ella let out the breath she was holding. You were ready to take on a shark for me, she whispered. He met her eyes. If it tried anything, yes. Ella's cheeks flushed. Before she could speak again, he glanced down the beach. Let's get you cleaned up. They walked slowly toward the shallow pool where rainwater had gathered between rocks. Liam helped her sit on a smoother stone before kneeling to check her wound. When Ella removed the makeshift bandage, he inhaled sharply. It looks worse. We need to clean it. He cupped water in his hands and gently poured it over the wound. Ella flinched but kept still. His touch was careful, tender. When he looked up at her, his expression softened. I am sorry you got hurt. She shook her head. I slipped because I was angry. I blamed you, and you deserved none of it. His brows lowered. Anger is normal out here, but I should not have snapped at you either. Her breath hitched as his hand brushed lightly over her calf. You scared me, he whispered. When you fell, I thought. He shook his head, unable to finish. Something warm swelled in her chest. Liam. She reached out and touched his cheek. His eyes darkened. He held perfectly still. Slowly, he lifted his hand and covered hers, holding it against his face. The intimacy of the moment made the air shift again, warmer, more charged. They stayed like that until the sun dipped low on the horizon, staining the sky orange and gold. As night approached, they returned to the shelter. Liam arranged leaves into a softer bed and carefully guided Ella inside. When he moved to settle beside her, she hesitated only a moment before whispering Liam. He looked at her in the dimness. Can you stay close again? His breath drew in tight. Always. He slid closer until their bodies touched from shoulder to knee. Ella rested her head on his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her into his warmth without hesitation, without fear. The ocean sang softly in the background, the wind rustled above them, and for the first time since the storm, Ella felt safe. Not just alive, safe. Liam rested his chin lightly on top of her head. Ella. His voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, we are going to make it. She closed her eyes, letting the words settle deep into her chest. I know. Outside the night grew darker, but inside the small shelter, something else was growing. Something delicate and warm, blooming slowly in the quiet space between survival and something that felt like the beginning of love. The next morning broke warmer than the last, with soft sunlight dripping through the palm leaves overhead, like gold melting down from the sky. Ella woke to the sound of gentle waves brushing the shore. Her body curled naturally against Liam's side, her head resting over the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For several long seconds, she simply breathed him in, unwilling to move, unwilling to break the fragile peace that felt too rare to disturb. Liam stirred before she did, and she felt his breath warm against her hair. "You okay?" he murmured, his voice still rough from sleep. She nodded against him. "Better." He pulled back slightly to look at her, and the sight of him in the soft morning light sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the sun. His features were softer here, less guarded, his eyes gentler. She saw the man, not the billionaire, not the CEO, not the legend on magazine covers. She saw him, and he was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. She pushed herself upright, wincing faintly as her injured leg brushed the ground. Liam's hand was instantly at her back, steadying her. "Easy," he whispered. She swallowed a flutter. "I'm okay." They stepped out onto the sand together, the morning breeze brushing cool against their skin. Liam scanned the horizon with a thoughtful expression. Clear skies. If anything is going to find us, today is the day. He walked with purpose, checking the raft debris again, lifting the emergency mirror, searching for anything with reflective surface. Ella trailed after him slowly, her leg aching, but her determination stronger. "Can we create a stronger signal?" she asked. He nodded. "If we can get sunlight to bounce cleanly, we might catch the attention of any passing vessel. But we need height." Ella glanced at the line of palms inland, and shelter to stand on. They ended up using a leaning palm near the edge of the tree line. Liam tested its stability before signaling Ella to sit on a rock nearby, while he maneuvered pieces of raft wood to brace himself. She watched him climb halfway up the angled trunk, holding the cracked emergency mirror in one hand. Light hit the surface in scattered glints. "Move it a little left," Ella called. Liam adjusted the angle. The flash brightened, catching the full power of the sun. "Like that," she said, breathless. He lowered the mirror and looked down at her, eyebrows raised. "That was impressive," she grinned. "I watch a lot of wilderness rescue shows." He laughed under his breath, a real laugh, one she had never heard from him before. It made her chest tighten with something warm. They spent hours sending signals across the water, hours in the heavy heat, hours under a sky too blue to be real. Ella's leg hurt more and more as time passed, but she did not say a word. Liam noticed anyway. He climbed down and crouched in front of her. "Let me see. I am fine," she insisted weakly. "Ella." His tone was gentle but firm. She relented. The bandage was fraying and her skin around it looked raw. Liam's brows drew tight with worry. "It is getting worse. We need help soon." She swallowed. "I know." He looked at her for a moment too long. Something deep and unspoken passed between them. Liam stood abruptly. "Stay here. I want to try one more signal before the clouds move in." She watched him climb again, the sunlight glinting off the mirror as he swept it across the horizon in slow, precise arcs. Minutes passed, then an hour, nothing. Ella's heart sank. The realization hit her hard. Maybe they would not be found. Maybe this island was where they would stay, until the ocean decided otherwise. She drifted toward the water's edge, needing air, needing space, needing to breathe. She sat just where the waves touched her toes, and let the cool foam wash over her thoughts. When she sensed movement beside her, she did not turn. Liam sank onto the sand next to her, his knee brushing hers lightly. She stared at the horizon. What if no one is coming? Liam was quiet for a long moment. Then he said softly, "Someone is coming." She shook her head. "You do not know that." He hesitated. "No, but I know something else." She looked at him then, really looked. His chest rose and fell slowly. His expression was open in a way she had only seen when he thought she was asleep. "When you were gone for a minute," he said, voice low, "I could not breathe." Ella's breath caught. His gaze dropped to her lips, then lifted back to her eyes. "I do not want to go back to strangers." The words unraveled something inside her like a thread pulled from the center of her heart. Ella swallowed. "What if out there," he continued, "you go back to the life you had, and we disappear from each other?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "We will not disappear." He watched her like he was memorizing every line of her face. "Then let me change that now." His hand lifted slowly, curling around her jaw with a gentleness that made her whole body tense. She leaned into his touch instinctively. Liam's forehead dipped to hers, breath mingling with her own, warm and trembling. "Ella." The way he said her name undid her completely. She closed the final inch between them. The kiss was soft at first, almost careful, like both of them were afraid to break the moment. Then it deepened, his other hand sliding to her waist, drawing her closer. She gripped the front of his shirt, pulling him in. The world narrowed to the heat of his mouth, the press of his chest, the warmth cutting through days of cold and fear. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Ella trembled. Liam rested his forehead against hers. "You okay?" "Yes," she whispered. "More okay than I have been in days." He exhaled slowly and brushed his thumb over her cheek. Then a sound cut sharply through the moment. A distant hum. Ella's head snapped up. "Did you hear that?" Liam rose to his feet, eyes scanning the horizon. Then he heard it too. A plane. Small, maybe a patrol search. He grabbed the mirror and sprinted toward the leaning palm tree, climbing fast despite exhaustion. Ella scrambled to her feet, heart pounding. Liam aimed the mirror at the sky, catching sunlight in a sudden bright burst. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." He swept it back and forth, back and forth. Ella held her breath, hands pressed over her mouth. The engine sound grew louder. The plane dipped slightly. It circled. Liam's pulse raced. "They see us," he shouted. Ella sobbed with relief. "They see us." Moments later, a flare dropped from the sky, trailing red smoke. Confirmation. Help was coming. Everything after that blurred. They ran to gather what little they had. Liam lifted Ella again, carrying her toward the open sand where rescue boats would land. Ella clutched his shoulders, trembling not from fear this time, but from overwhelming release. She pressed her forehead to his neck. "Liam." His hold tightened. "I am here. I have you." The rescue boat reached the shore, fast its siren, slicing through the quiet island air. Voices shouted instructions. Hands reached toward them. Liam set Ella down gently, but did not let go of her until medics physically guided her to the boat. As they lifted her in, she grabbed his wrist, eyes wide with panic. "You are coming too right." Liam's chest rose sharply. "I am not letting you go." He climbed in right behind her. The boat sped away, leaving the island shrinking behind them. Ella leaned into him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They were safe. They were found. But something deep inside both of them knew the hardest part was still ahead. The hospital lights were too bright, far too bright. After days of darkness and salt and sun, Ella lay on a gurney surrounded by medics in navy jackets, their voices overlapping in rapid, clipped tones. Blood pressure low, early infection, possible dehydration. She tried to answer questions, but everything spun, like the ocean still moved beneath her. Liam's voice kept breaking through the noise, low, steady, anchoring her. "She is with me. I will sign whatever you need. Please be careful with her leg." She reached blindly for him, and his hand closed around hers, instantly strong, warm grounding. They separated them only when the emergency bay demanded it. Liam was pulled into a different room for evaluation, and Ella felt the moment his hand slipped from hers, like someone cutting a lifeline. The quiet afterward hurt more than her leg. Hours blurred. Doctors, IV fluids, a heated blanket, a clean bandage, a new antibiotic. They wheeled her into a recovery room and left her alone with a window overlooking the harbor where the rescue boat had docked. The sun was setting over Austin in a bruised ribbon of orange and purple. Ella blinked heavily as exhaustion tugged at her eyes when suddenly the door cracked open. Liam entered, fresh clothes clean, hospital sweatshirt hair still damp from the nurse who had insisted he wash up, but exhaustion carved dark hollows beneath his eyes. Ella whispered his name as if exhaling a prayer. He crossed the room in 3 long steps and cupped her face with both hands, a trembling breath escaping him as if seeing her alive in a clean bed broke something fragile inside him. "You scared me," he murmured, forehead dipping toward hers. She gave a weak smile. "You scared me, too." He laughed under his breath, the sound small and cracked. They stayed like that, foreheads touching breaths, mingling hands clasped, until a knock at the door snapped the moment apart. A doctor stepped in. "Mr. Cross, we need to discuss some things with you privately." Liam stiffened. "Anything you can say to me," Ella murmured. "You can say in front of her." The doctor shook his head, apologetic. "It concerns liability and corporate protocol." Liam's jaw clenched. Corporate protocol. Ella felt a cold flicker beneath her ribs. "Go," she whispered. "It's okay." Liam didn't move for several seconds, as if afraid she would disappear the moment he stepped away. Finally, he squeezed her hand once, then followed the doctor out. The door clicked shut behind him. Minutes passed. Too many. Ella stared at her reflection in the window, the hospital lights glowing faintly on the glass. She looked pale, exhausted, slightly hollowed out. A girl who had survived the ocean only to drown in silence. When Liam finally returned, his expression was different, tight-edged, like someone had carved the softness out and left stone behind. "What happened?" she asked instantly. He sat down slowly, bracing his elbows on his knees. "The board knows about the island, about us." Her heart ticked painfully. "Us." He shut his eyes for a moment. "They think you are a risk to the company, a distraction, a liability." Ella felt her stomach dip. "After everything we went through, after you saved my life." He let out a rough exhale. Someone leaked the rescue report. The media already has it. When he lifted his phone, she saw dozens of notifications lighting the screen. Headlines flashing bold and vicious. Billionaire CEO, stranded at sea, with employee romance or recklessness. Cross-tech PR. Assistant linked to CEO after survival ordeal. Is she a gold digger or survivor scandal? Unfolds Ella's throat tightened so hard she could barely breathe. Liam reached for her but hesitated, his hand hovering over hers, as if realizing suddenly that touching her might be another headline. Ella whispered the question she feared. Liam, what do we do now? He stared at her with a heaviness she had not seen since the raft. The board wants distance until things calm down. She felt the words hit her like cold water. Distance. His expression cracked for a second before he forced it back into something neutral. They're worried about the stock drop, the optics, the timing. Ella's voice was small. And you, what do you want? He opened his mouth, closed it. Pain flickered in his eyes, a storm barely contained. Ella, I want you safe. That is not what I asked. He swallowed, hard muscles in his jaw flexing. You do not understand. They will destroy your name if I do not step back. They already are. He shook his head. It will calm down only if I am not near you. Ella felt something sharp twist in her chest. So the answer is distance. He looked away. Just for now. She nodded slowly, but her vision blurred. For now felt too close to never. She pulled her hand back gently. Liam flinched. Ella. She forced a tight breath. You should go. He stepped forward instantly. No, not like this. You just said your board does not want us together. He winced like the words cut him. I know, but that is not what I meant. Ella met his eyes with a soft breaking. She didn't try to hide. Liam, I do not want to be your risk assessment, not your liability, not the problem your board wants you to fix. His voice cracked. You are not any of those things, but you are choosing them anyway. He took a step closer. I am choosing to protect you. She shook her head, tears gathering. That is not protection, Liam. That is fear. He froze. Fear. Yes, she whispered. You are afraid that if you choose me, your world will fall apart. His breath wavered. Ella, please do not do this. Please do not make me leave this room like this. She looked at him for one long, trembling moment, then whispered, It is already done. The silence that followed felt like the ocean all over again, swallowing them whole. Liam took one shaky step back, then another, his eyes fixed on her, with a devastation that made her want to collapse. I'll fix this, he said hoarsely. I swear to you, Ella, I'll fix it. She closed her eyes because looking at him hurt too much. When she opened them, the door was closing behind him, and she was alone again. The next day came heavy, quiet, suffocating. Ella was discharged with crutches, antibiotics, and a warning to rest. No family, no close friends in Austin. No one waiting at the curb. She called a rideshare and went back to her tiny one-bedroom apartment that suddenly felt too small, too dark, too empty. Her phone lit up with messages, not from Liam, from coworkers, reporters, strangers, people speculating on her life, her motives, her character, gold digger, clout chaser, cross-tech scandal girl. Ella turned the phone face down on the counter. Her body shook as she sank onto the couch, clutching a pillow to her chest. For days on the raft, she had dreamed of safety, warmth, home. Now she had all three, and she had never felt lonelier in her life. Meanwhile, across the city, Liam stood in front of a boardroom table full of executives staring at him like he was a wildfire threatening their empire. The company cannot endure this scandal, one of them said. Your association with this girl is damaging. Girl, Liam repeated, slowly, voice dropping into warning. She is my employee, she is a survivor, and she is not the problem here. The board exchanged uneasy glances. Liam took a breath, forcing himself to stay composed. I will step back from PR. I will stay out of the spotlight temporarily. But Ella is off limits. She will not be scapegoated. His voice was steel. If anyone targets her publicly or internally, I will remove you myself. The room fell silent, the threat unmistakable. But when he walked out of that meeting, something inside him cracked wide open. Because protecting her meant losing her. That night, Ella lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tears drying on her cheeks. She whispered into the dark the 4 words she never thought she'd say aloud. "Liam, did you forget me already?" Across the city, Liam stared at his phone screen, thumb hovering over her name, 1,000 words clawing up his throat. All choking into silence, he whispered into the emptiness of his penthouse. "Ella, I have not forgotten anything." But the world around them was louder than their truth. And for now that was enough to tear them apart. Ella did not know how long she had slept, only that she woke to the dim gray blur of morning filtering through her blinds, the apartment cold, the silence too loud, the ache in her chest heavier than the bandages around her leg. She lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of her old refrigerator, the distant sounds of traffic below, and the hollow beat of her own heartbeat, echoing in a room that had never felt so empty. She tried to move on autopilot, making coffee, opening the curtains, hobbling to the couch. Everything felt unfamiliar. Everything felt like life before the ocean, and yet nothing at all like life before the ocean. Her phone buzzed with another news notification she didn't bother reading. The world had claimed her story without ever asking what it cost her. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sank deeper into the couch, willing herself not to cry again. She had cried enough to refill the ocean she had nearly died in. When the knock came, it was so soft she thought she imagined it. 3 slow, hesitant taps. She froze, breath held suspended in her chest. Another knock, firmer this time. Ella took a shaky breath, grabbed her crutches, and pushed herself upright, each movement sending a dull ache up her injured leg. She reached the door and pressed her hand to the knob, but hesitated, afraid to hope, afraid to break. If the person on the other side wasn't the one she wished most desperately it was. She opened the door. Liam stood there. Not the Liam with the tailored suit, not the billionaire CEO with the perfect composure, but Liam in jeans and a plain gray shirt, eyes rimmed, red jaw shadowed with exhaustion, hair messy like he had run his hands through it 1,000 times. He looked like a man who had not slept, a man who had lost something irreplaceable, a man who had come anyway. Ella's breath caught. Liam. His chest rose unevenly, as if just seeing her knocked the air out of him. "Hi," he whispered, voice hoarse. She tightened her grip on her crutches. "What are you doing here?" He shook his head, a small, helpless movement. "I could not stay away." She blinked quickly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your board, your company, the press. I do not care about any of it," he said before she could finish. His voice came out sharper than intended, but full of truth. "I do not care what they think or what it costs me. I only care about you." Her throat closed. Liam stepped inside, slowly as if afraid she might close the door on him. "I tried to do the right thing," he said quietly. "I thought distancing myself might protect you. But all it did was hurt you, hurt me, hurt everything that mattered." He swallowed, hard, eyes fixed on hers with unshielded desperation. "I walked away from you because I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. I was wrong." Ella felt tears building hot behind her eyes. Liam's voice softened. "Ella, I did not go through hell with you just to lose you to fear afterward." That line, that raw, trembling confession, cracked something deep inside her. Her voice broke on a whisper. "You left without saying goodbye." "I know," he said softly. "I hated myself the second I walked out that door." She steadied herself on her crutches. "Why did you come back?" He stepped closer, closing the space between them one slow step at a time. "Because every second without you felt wrong. Because the world kept spinning, and I could not breathe in any of it without thinking about you. Because when I close my eyes, all I see is you on that raft, and all I hear is your voice telling me you want me close." Ella's lips parted, but the words tangled in her chest. Liam reached out carefully, as if giving her every chance to pull away. "May I?" he whispered. She nodded barely. His fingers brushed her cheek, lightly tracing the line of her jaw with a reverence that made her breath stutter. "Ella," he murmured, voice breaking, "I will not run again. Not from you, not from us, not from anything that scares me." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, catching a tear. "You are the only warmth I have wanted, long before that raft, long before the storm, long before any of this." She felt her heart collapse into itself and then expand too big for her chest. Liam's forehead dipped to hers, breath trembling. "Ella, can I warm you up again?" The question, the one that had saved her life on the ocean, now held all the weight of a promise. She let her crutches fall carefully to the side, letting herself lean fully into him, her hands gripping the fabric of his shirt, as if anchoring herself. Liam wrapped his arms around her gently but completely, holding her like something precious, fragile, irreplaceable. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling the familiar steady scent of him, and the world finally felt right again. Ella whispered into his shirt, "I missed you." His arms tightened around her, his voice cracking against her hair. "I missed you more than I can ever say." They held each other for a long, long moment, the kind of moment that felt like it rewrote everything before it. Outside the city moved on cars, passing people, hurrying storms gathering somewhere beyond the skyline. But inside her quiet apartment, two survivors stood, holding on to something fragile and powerful and real. Liam pulled back, just enough to look at her. His eyes were soft, full of something that made her heart tremble. "I am here," he whispered, "and I am not going anywhere." She smiled through tears. "Good, because neither am I." He kissed her forehead gently, tenderly, with a warmth that felt like home. And just like that, the storm inside both of them finally settled. If you're still here, listening to Ella and Liam's story, maybe something in their journey touched a place in you that you don't always talk about. The part that knows what it feels like to survive something you were never prepared for, the part that understands loneliness, even when surrounded by people, the part that still believes that love can arrive in the most unexpected moment, even in the middle of an ocean, with nothing but fear and hope, between two strangers. Maybe you've been Ella before, trying to stay strong for everyone while quietly falling apart. Inside, maybe you've been Liam, carrying the weight of old scars, pretending you're fine, because the world expects strength from you every single day. Maybe you know what it's like to feel invisible, unheard, misunderstood, judged too quickly. Or maybe you just needed a reminder that even in your darkest moment, someone out there would choose. You would reach for you, would warm you back to life when the cold felt too heavy. Stories like this one are more than entertainment. They are reminders that the human heart is stronger than the storms we survive, and softer than we admit. And if Ella and Liam's journey meant something to you, even a small spark, then I want to invite you to join this community. This little corner of the internet, where stories are not just told, they are felt. Here, every narrative comes with a heartbeat. Every character carries a truth, and every ending, whether messy or magical, holds a piece of hope for someone out there listening. So if this story held you, if it captured your imagination, or made your heart ache, or made you whisper, "Oh my God," under your breath, then take a second right now to tap like. It sounds small, but it tells me you want more stories like this, more emotional journeys, more slow burn romance, more survival moments, more heart-pounding connections that feel honest and human and cinematic. And if you want to keep traveling with me through all these stories, billionaire romances, cabin storms, Western love mafia redemption, modern heartbreak second chance arcs, then hit subscribe so you never miss the next journey. I promise each one will be crafted with the same care, the same emotional depth, the same cinematic pacing that brought Ella and Liam to life for you today. And if you really want to be part of this story world, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing how far these stories travel, and I love hearing what moment in the story made you gasp, made you smile, made you hold your breath. Was it the first time Liam wrapped his arms around Ella in the freezing dark? Was it the moment she whispered, "I want you close"? Was it the rescue when they thought they might lose each other forever? Or was it that final knock on the door when love won over fear? Tell me your moment, your favorite line, your favorite feeling. Because in the end, these stories belong to all of us. And if there's someone in your life who needs a reminder that warmth can find you again, even after the storm, share this video with them. You never know whose heart you might help keep afloat. Thank you for being here, for feeling this story all the way through, for giving these characters space in your day and space in your heart. I can't wait to see you in the next love story.